Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And it is my mission to bring you thought leaders, to bring you people that can pour into you each week and help you collapse that timeline to success. And today, I think you're going to be really impressed with who I'm bringing on the show. So I'd like to welcome Coach JV, CEO of 3T Warrior Academy, Top Crypto, spiritual and mindset coach. With owning over 7 businesses, Coach JV is also an author of 2 books, a top podcast host, and a featured powerhouse leader. He remains dedicated to his family, children, and entrepreneurship while following his number one mission in this world, creating a positive impact on someone's life every single day. This is somebody that I align with very well. Thanks for joining us today, Coach JV.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Appreciate it.
I am always just in awe when I meet other people with, even though I feel like we're aligned, we have the same similar mindset, I still feel like there's so much I can learn from you.
Oh, thank you. Me too. Both. That's the essence of being human, right? Knowing when you realize you know nothing, you gain everything, which is the beauty in it.
I love that you have so many of these isms. And I actually wanted to read your signature quote and kind of start the conversation off with that. Is that okay?
I would love it. That's beautiful.
Okay. So I'm going to have to get my sheet out here. So you say, what you believe in your heart, you think in your mind, will eventually become your words and your reality. If you can see it in your mind, eventually you can hold it right here in your hand. What you repeatedly do gets ingrained in your subconscious mind. What gets ingrained in your subconscious mind becomes your unconscious activity.
Yes.
Let's unpack this.
Yes. So the seed all started with The Secret, which is over my shoulder right here. It's like after something that happened to me, and I was like, wow, thoughts become things. What does that mean? Thoughts become things. And I realized that where are my thoughts coming from, right? If you take the word earth and you unscramble it, it means heart, right? It's coming from my heart, the center of my body. And so when I started to doing thoughts become things, everything became very slow and things weren't happening too fast. Then I really started to get into my heart and actually feel what I wanted to accomplish. And I started to let the thoughts match in my mind. Then I started to see things come a lot faster. So what you believe in your heart, you think in your mind, and then they started to become my words. And then by believing in my heart, I was bold enough to speak it. Once I was bold enough to speak it, right, then I repeatedly did the conscious activities that I needed to do that matched what my heart was feeling. And then eventually it became my reality. When I noticed this actually started to work, I'm like, okay, cool. So I can look forward. What do I really, really, really want for my life? I can see, whether it's been created or not, but I can feel what I want in my life. And then I get my thoughts to match that. And if I repeat those thoughts or those words long enough for a long enough period of time with matched actions, eventually I can bring it into reality, right? And so I realized that everything that I'm experiencing today is the repetitive activities of yesterday. So that my free will from yesterday, the repetitive activities, are the reality that I'm facing today. And I think that's the biggest piece that people are missing is, they think about stuff, they create a vision board, but their heart is not really in it. So they got their foot on the brake and gas at the same time. It's like, well, I'm manifesting, I want something, but my heart's broken, or I have regret, or I'm constantly bringing up the past. So you say you want something, but you're telling your heart a completely different thing.
That is so true. And I love that you referenced The Secret. And if you don't mind, can you kind of take us back to that pivotal moment? Is that something you're willing to share with us?
Yes, yeah. So December 18th, 2006, 17 years ago, I'll spare you the whole story before, but I ended up attempting suicide on December 2006 due to a massive opiate addiction. I had a small injury that happened I was a bodybuilder, and I got presented opiates. Back then it was a epidemic. I mean, it was like back in 2005, 2004 to 2006, 2008. I mean, there was an opiate epidemic happening, and I was a clean cut guy, really good person, good steward of society, doing good things, just a really insecure person. I ended up taking an opiate for an injury, and it gave me this euphoric feeling that I'd never had before. And like a lot of people who had, never had a drug addiction before, started with opiates, and it turned into a massive addiction that lasted about 3 years to all the way down to suicide. I felt that I wasn't worth anything. I didn't feel worth it. And on December 18, 2006, I tried to take my own life with a massive amount of opiates. I say committed suicide because John Vasquez died and JV was born, a whole new person. And I actually, for the first time ever in my life, I never really wasn't taught spirituality or a connection to God or Christ or anything. As a kid, I was baptized Catholic when I was born, but I knew Christmas and Easter was Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. And so what's interesting, right before I attempted suicide, I knelt down and prayed. And I'd never prayed before. I just said, "Dear Father God," that's how I start all my prayers now. And I prayed to this thing, God, whatever it was. And 48 hours later, I woke up to a phone call from my mom. And interesting thoughts become things. My first thought when I woke up was, I can't even kill myself correctly. So now here I am waking up from this slumber, and I'm like, my phone's ringing, the Razor flip phone, and I said mom on it. And I pick it up, and she's like, "I don't know what the F is going on with you." My mom's a classy lady. She was, for her to say that was pretty serious. And she's like, "You need to read a book called The Secret." And I went and got the book, The Secret. It had the CD, the DVD ROM or whatever. I put it in the computer. And it was like the craziest moment I've ever had in my life. I'm sitting there and I'm like, I created all this. I'm like, my thoughts aligned me. Like I was just in the wrong vehicle. I mean, I got everything I asked for. I mean, it just was in the wrong vehicle. And I was like, well, what if I reverse engineer this? What if now, I'm broke. I've lost my business. I have negative money in my account. I'm a drug addict. In the world's eyes and my own eyes in that moment, I was, a loser. I was like, what the heck? I'm like, well, I have nowhere else to go but up. And so I started doing thoughts become things. And I started doing, I'm powerful, I am strong, I am worthy. And I've been doing this for 17 years now. Now, back then I was just doing it based on just pure blind faith. And now I understand the mechanisms of how the subconscious mind works. When I say a thought, what does it mean? What does frequency mean? What does energy mean? And that was 17 years ago that I read the book, The Secret. And so it's evolved into who I am today.
That is super interesting. And I love what you're saying. And I know a lot of people when you say you should read The Secret, they're like, no. That's woo woo. That's not real stuff. But it really does. I mean, I read a book by Dr. Tara Swart. Have you heard of her?
I have not, no.
Oh, I just probably sent you on a new rabbit trail
Love it.
because
Love it.
Dr. Tara Swart wrote a book, and I'm trying to remember the name of the book. It's a one-word book. Anyway, she's a neuroscientist,
Okay.
and she went through each of the principles of The Secret based on her neuroscience background, her doctorate, and put the science behind each of the principles and why they work.
Yes.
So The Source, that's the name of her book.
So I have to check.
Yeah, and it was just, I believed it. I know there's science behind that, why it works, because it's all about what you train your brain to see,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And your subconscious to see.
Yeah.
And she really puts that science behind it. And so it's a fascinating book.
That's beautiful. You brought up, the source, the book, the source. Well, like, when Moses went up into the burning bush, after that, what is the first thing that Moses did, right? So The Secret led me to Christianity and the Bible and God. And like, that's because if I would have got presented a Bible right after I woke from that, not having any foundation, I'd be like, get this thing out of here, right?
Yep.
But now I use the Bible as my secret now, because the Bible gives so many hints. Moses goes up to the burning bush. The first thing he does, he didn't see, people say he didn't see God face to face, but he got close to God, and he tells everything wrong with him, just like I did. Oh, I have a speech impediment. I got a limp. I'm old. I can't, free them. And he says, from here on out, my name in the Bible, or my name, is the great I am. What that told me, it's a secret. What you put behind the words I am becomes your truth, because God created what's called the reticular activating system within your brain. It's your guidance system. And it can't see what's going on in your reality. It couldn't see that I was a drug addict. It couldn't see that I wasn't taking care of my daughter. It couldn't see that I had lost my business. All it could respond to was what I was giving the input to. That's it. And so I changed the input, and it changed the reality. And I think a lot of people right now think it's macro to micro, but it's micro to macro. And that's the concept of the secret. It's from the microcosm to the macro and the things that you're experiencing within your current reality. And that's why I think now, there's a lot of bad stuff I did as a drug addict. I'm just being honest. I mean, I planted a lot of really, really, really not good seeds. And so it makes sense why it took me so long of reprogramming my mind, putting good seeds down to where now I'm seeing a lot of success. It took 17 years, but well, no, not that, about 14, 13 years when I started to really see the success. But I mean, I'm now seeing the fruits of those labors, right? And I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated with the secret. Well, I did a vision board. I said I am affirmations and I don't have my Lamborghini yet. Well, faith without works is dead. Right?
Yep.
You got to put in the work, and we're here to transmute that darkness into light. And there's these deep grooves that get created in your brain. I'm probably in the book Source, where we have to rewire that subconscious mind programming, which came from our parents, our grandparents, people, places, things.
I should learn how to swallow. We'll cut that out. Don't worry.
Boy.
Right, Trey? No.
He's like, no.
Wow. That was a rough one. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no, take your time. I'll get some water too.
Me. Wow, that one hurt. Okay, let me know when he's back.
Okay. We are like still rolling. Yeah, I was gonna have you fix your earpiece. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So you can just start from your next question, and I'll edit it together.
Trying to remember what he last said.
Where were we at?
We're on the reticular activation system.
Yeah, reticular activating system. Yep, we're talking about the God's GPS reticular activating system, and what you tell it basically. It's like its guidance system in micro to macrocosm.
Yes. Okay, I know where I wanted to go now.
Cool.
So it's so interesting that you talk about those neuro pathways. We just had a speaker at an organization yesterday that she is a StrengthsFinder coach, but even before that, she was an actuarial scientist. I think I said that correctly. And so she loves data, right? Have you done your StrengthsFinders?
Yes, yeah, I did it when I was in the bank. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
You need to look at her app. It's amazing. I'm going to have her on the show. And
Awesome.
she just blew everybody's mind yesterday. But she was talking, somebody questioned her about, do your strengths change? And that's when she started going in and she described them as like your neural pathways, those habits, as highways in your brain.
Yes.
And that's why it's so hard to break a habit, because you got this highway where that information is just rushing through your brain. And then you have these other little bitty things that you really have to struggle because you haven't trained that pathway, right? But you can train it, you can make it bigger, but it takes work.
Yep. And that's what, like, a lot of things that, like, a lot of people were like, well, how did you become an opiate addict? I don't blame anybody for it, but the things that happened to me as a child created the pathways, those highways, those insecurities, those deep grooves. And, it would be foolish to think that just because I read a book, The Secret, or just because, I'm practicing different things, that those things are just going to disappear. It's part of the human experience. The only way to get them, and it goes into the saying that I say, right? What you repeatedly do gets ingrained in your subconscious mind. What gets ingrained in your subconscious mind becomes your unconscious activity. So I realized that I had to do something for a long enough period of time to rewire those pathways. And it doesn't mean that sometimes they're not going to come up, but I have the tools in my tool belt to be able to overcome the feeling or go back into forgiveness and things like that. So I think that's the biggest thing around. And in our society now, everything is so quick, so quick. And I know that's where a lot of frustration comes in for people, especially if they're trying to really change their life. And in all this social media, right? Everybody's posting their highlight reel, so they don't see the often the real deal of what's happening. And so even though I've, my life is completely different now, I still revisit that old self. I still revisit insecurity, but I just have different tools in my tool belt to overcome it.
Well, and I think that's so important what you just said. You have different tools in your tool belt. And I think that, I think, and I'm guilty of this. I did this for so many years, what I call my rebirth, my awakening, to learn that I control the reality, my perception of reality around me, right? with every choice I make. That's where that RAS comes in, the reticular activating system. I control that because if I want to see a blue Toyota, I tell my subconscious I want to see a blue Toyota, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then voila, blue Toyotas everywhere. That's how that
Yeah.
works. But I think it's important that I didn't know to go get those tools before. But once I knew to go get those tools, now I'm like, I want every tool in the tool shed. Give it all to me. I'm constantly going. So I don't think I was doing this when we last talked. I am in school right now to get certified for neurolinguistic programming.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Isn't that fun?
Really cool. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's really, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Like I had this moment that I think would help explain the whole essence of this, right? So I go to Peru quite a bit, and I was just this was 2 trips ago. I was sitting in Peru in a garden, and I go there and I completely I just came back 5 days ago. I just did my trip, and I sit in
jealous.
a garden. And thank you. And I just sit there, and so here I am in a garden, sitting there at the highest level frequency I've ever experienced for myself personally, right? Going from drug addict in crack houses to this garden 17 years later. And so this will explain it in a physical context for people. So I had this it wasn't a vision. I couldn't see it. It was a feeling of my old self dragging my daughter through crack houses to buy drugs. Like, she's a 3-year-old little girl, right? So, and I thought for a moment while I'm sitting there, I'm like, wait a minute, there's somebody in the world right now dragging their son or daughter through a crack house right now. There's somebody doing that as I'm sitting in a garden. And I'm like, what's the difference between, if that energy still exists and the energy that I'm sitting in exists, then what is that? How did I go from being in a crack house 17 years earlier to sitting in a garden? What it was it was a total epiphany for me. I'm like, okay. So what I did is I got the secret first. So that was new information, right? New information. And I adopted the new information. But what happened was, knowledge is not power till it's enacted upon. I enacted the power by activity, right? And my words, and then my actions, and then I repeated it over and over and over again until it became a new reality. Then I've been this banking job, right? So then I'm like, well, I want to be a VP. Well, that's impossible. Not for me. It's not impossible. So I did all the activities over to the point where I just kept doing these activities. And what I realized, I was just accessing different frequency fields that have always existed. Like, so as I was in a crack house, there's someone sitting in a garden in Peru, right, with that highest level frequency. And so what I hopefully it helps people with hope is that any version of you exists. Like every version of you, like I say, we're going to build $1 billion ecosystem. People think I'm crazy. I'm like, no, I've already lived it. I've already felt it. It's already been in my heart. I've already spent the resources. I've already helped people with it. I just now have to be present in this current reality and trust and know that everything being presented to me is based on that reality that I'm telling my Raz, because my Raz has to give me what I want. That's how God designed it. That's how God designed it. Your dominant thought, because everything comes from consciousness and thought. There's nothing that we're looking at here all around us. Nothing didn't come from thought. It had to come from creation. It had to come from some form of thought. And so all the reticular activating system can do is respond to thought and give you confirmation that that's true.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned that you were a VP at a bank, and now you're this big entrepreneur. I believe you own 7 companies, more than 7 companies, right?
We're at 6 now, 6. So we went back. We actually started to condense a little bit. So we had 7, and then I just shut one down. So we're at 6 right now.
Like so many businesses. I'm just going to
Too
say
much.
that. So
That's why we're consolidating. Yeah.
So what led you to leave that high-paying job and start your entrepreneurial journey?
Man, it was, so here we are. I attempted suicide. So I ended up getting. So one of my mentors that helped me through the little journey got me a job at a bank, and it was like it was interesting. So I'll start with that, and then I'll speed it up. But he called me one day, and I'm doing the secret. I'm doing I am affirmations, all this stuff. And he calls me one day, and he's like, hey. And I needed a job at that point. And he was like, I needed to take care of my daughter. And he was like, listen, hey, I want you to show up to this interview at the bank. And I'm like, the bank? I mean, I was a bodybuilder. It didn't make any sense at all. Like it did. I was fitness, military. And he goes, just come. So I go and I buy a suit for 50 cents at Goodwill, a thrift store. And I put on this oversized suit and I go there. And this is really, really important to the story. So I sat down with this lady named Lori Schmidt. And so I always give her a shout out because she's the one that started this journey and gave me the opportunity. So I sit in front of her and we go through this interview process. I'm thinking, how can I get a job as a banker? It doesn't make any sense. So I do the best I can. At the end of the interview, I told her, I said, if you give me a job, I promise you I'll be the best employee employee you've ever hired. And I brought my A game. I brought it. And so I'm leaving. I'm thinking there's no way she's going to hire me. So she calls me and she says to me, she says, 15 minutes later, we're going to hire you. And I said, I'm thinking like janitor. I'm like, I'll take it. And she's like, we're going to hire you as a banker. She says, I liked your energy. And I was like, okay, cool. And so she says, we can train the skill. So they put me in banker school. I went through all that stuff. And then each promotion I got all the way up to VP was, again, they would say, we like your energy, right? Maybe you don't have as much education as the other people, but there's something about your energy that we liked. It was every time I got hired for these new positions. And then, and I worked really hard. I got the skills, and then I ended up being a VP at a bank. And they sent me to a banking school called CBA, Executive Banking School. So we fly out to Furman University. We take over the campus, Greenville, South Carolina. We take over the campus, Furman University, during the summer. It's a religious studies college. And so we're there as executives, and there's executives from all over the world that some are going to be CFO, CEO, some are making 250 to $1 million. But I noticed there was like, we're making all this money, the American dream, but everybody just seems so caught up in, sleeping pills and, partying at night. And this campus was beautiful, and nobody talked about how beautiful this campus was. And there was this gardener that I met there, and I wish I could remember his name, and I wish I could meet him once again someday. But the garden is beautiful there. And I just one day started talking to him, and I'm like, you just seem so happy, man. And he's like, I have everything I need. I got my flowers, I got my garden, I go home, I eat with my family. And here we are as executives trying to get to regional president. And I just created a brand new addiction. That's all it was. I was not any better than I was as an opiate addict. Trying to get to regional president. I want the next position. I want the next 535 IBMW. I want the bigger house. I got a house close to a golf course. And a new addiction had just appeared. It was this edification addiction. And the broken little boy showed up again. And I started to feel this tug that I had to leave. I had to go find myself. In 2017, I walked out of a high-paid vice president job to go on this journey. And it was not what I thought it was going to be. I left. I wrote a book. I started a podcast. I launched my first program. And January 2018, I spent 6 months building it. When I launched my program, I was super excited. And guess how many people signed up?
1.
0. And then the next time I launched it, 0. And so I went through this for about an 18-month run, and I cashed out my whole 401k, all of my money, not lost all my money because it got me to where I'm at today. I invested all of my income, sold my dream home, went through all this stuff, and then I finally got it going. It was awesome. We started blowing up. Our academy started doing very, very well. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. Boom. And they shut our business down. And I'm like, So I had to go back to the principles of the secret, right? Thoughts become things. I'm like, I can either just, I can go back into a negative state of mind. It's not going to work out. It's not working for me. I could have gone back and been a VP, made well over 6 figures. And I'm like, no, I'm going to continue to push through this. I'm going to believe that it's possible. So that's when I got really clear on my mindset, really clear on my vision. And that's why I really started to understand that it's not macro to micro. It didn't matter what was happening with the pandemic. I mean, that was sad. I'm not saying I'm not empathetic to people that things happen. What I'm saying is what was happening externally had nothing to do with what was internal. And so I lost everything. They shut our business down. I kept my crypto portfolio. Thank God I was not touching. I moved back in with my parents at 43 years old. And I said, hey, just give me a year. And I'm going to figure out how this money works, how the mindset works. I understand the mindset, but I got to figure out a way where this will never happen to my family again. I don't ever want to be in a position where someone can just shut my business down and I can't take care of my family. And I did. I devoted my life to understanding how money moves through the system, how the mechanisms of the stock market works, how do the elites manage their money. And I had the mindset down, but I didn't have the financial down because I came from poverty. I didn't come from a rich family. Mm-hmm. And so just like I did with rewiring my subconscious mind for success, I had to rewire my brain for wealth, because they're two different things. You can be successful and not wealthy. The gardener was successful. Yep. Right? Success to him was being in a garden. And so I thought that they were hand in hand, but if you don't understand how money works. And so then, from there, we started building these companies. And then what we started to do is, as we built success in our companies, we started to open in companies that we enjoyed doing. For example, I invest heavily in insurance. So I was like, oh, okay, awesome. And I fell in love with it. So 3 years later, I got licensed and started my own insurance arm of one of my companies, right? So like we decided to do companies that we actually embody instead of trying to do something to make money, if that makes sense. And so that's where the success came from. Everything we do is something we actually enjoy doing.
I love that. So talk to us about your 3T Warrior Academy. Why did you do this? And I love what you say. And again, I could quote you all day long. I wrote down so many quotes from our conversation, but you want to shift people's mindset from job just over broke mentality to one, and I got to say that again, job just over broke
Yep.
mentality, to one of financial freedom and abundance. How do you do that? And what inspired you to start this academy?
Yeah, thank you. It was well, it was a fitness academy at first, fitness mindset, because I know the secret and I know how to,
Hmm.
do all these things. But I was like, I realized because of my own self, my own personal stuff, I'm like, wait a minute, I was in banking and I don't know how money works. Like that makes no sense. I was in banking, but what I mean by that is we're trained in America since the 1900s. They said we have enough educated people. We want a society of workers, and in America, we're taught to trade time for money, and we trade so much time for money we don't have time to pay attention. So what people do is they get their paycheck and they just throw it with some 401k manager and they hope that at retirement age they're going to have enough money. The hope is not a strategy. And so what happens is the old model of finances isn't going to work anymore. It's just not going to work anymore. And so what I help people understand is we want to use money to free up time versus trading time for money. So first step is to teach people financial literacy. Like, what is money? Right? In America, money is just debt. That's all it is. There is no backing to our money. It's just a debt-based society. Number two is learning financial discipline. And basically all I'm teaching is everything that I did. Right. And so I was able to like learn the skill, and then I taught people. So financial discipline is like, okay, I started creating budgets and understanding non-negotiables. And then once I started to create cash flow and a gap between my debt and my income, or a positive gap, then I was like, okay, now I have extra money. Well, in America, when people have extra money, what do? They buy a nicer car, they get a bigger house, right? And what they're doing is they're spending the rest of their lives chasing paying that off. The gap, you should, number three, start to invest. Right. Once you learn how to invest, you'll understand, because it's your money. You worked really hard for it. So you
Hmm.
should have some sort of sovereignty and understanding. Once you learn how to invest and that starts to grow, then the key is to learn how to compound and protect. And so basically all I did was the way I always tell people is I'm just one step ahead coming back and teaching. One step ahead, because there's no massive amount of wealth in my family. I'll be the first person that builds generational wealth in my family. And so I feel it's my responsibility now to go back and teach my kids. So my son is growing up in a completely different paradigm. My daughter's 8, or so my daughter's 20 and my son is 8. So my daughter grew up when I was a crackhead the first 4 years of her life, to see me go into a banker that would spend money on all this stuff, BMWs, big houses, and we're always broke. Next paycheck, next paycheck. But we looked like we were rich, right? Now she
Hmm.
calls me the poorest, richest man in the world. I show up in tank tops, I'm not wearing shoes right now, and it's like we have everything we need, and we have it abundantly, right? And so now I have to go back and teach my kids. So I'm teaching my daughter, so she knows that money is to free up time, right? So I'm teaching my daughter to live with me as long as she can, as long as she wants to, and to invest every single dime so that she can live off her investments and do whatever she wants the rest of her life, instead of telling her to get a mortgage, get a 74-month auto loan, go to college and spend $300,000 and spend the rest of your life trying to pay it off with a $30,000 a year job. So the 3T Warrior Academy is much bigger than that too. It's going into rewiring your health, your subconscious mind, understanding who you truly are, right? And through the process. And so on top of that, right, we need resources. So once we rewire the internal and we understand who we truly are, then we work to find things that bring us joy, right? Like you do in your podcast. I can tell you love doing this. I love doing these interviews. I love doing the 3T Warrior Academy. And that's what we really work to do, is to help people discover who they are, and then from there be rewarded for being who they are. So
I think that's beautiful. And you know, most people don't have such an age gap between, I mean, there are people that have the age gap. Me, nope, I went boom, boom. Mine were 13 and a half months apart. Um,
yeah.
but it's really interesting to see the difference in the dynamics that your daughter was brought up with and that your son is now being brought up with. But I love the fact that you're going back with your daughter and reteaching. That says a lot.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, she was like, it was interesting because she got to see me go through even losing everything in the pandemic. We had to move back with my parents. She was going into sophomore year. Imagine that. We had this, our life was, we had this big house. She didn't know that things were not well until we had to move back in with my parents. And so she was like, wow. But she got to see the resilience and the discipline and the not stopping, and what it means to have faith, number one, number two, to be persistent, and number three, to follow through with something. And so from that, she's been able to build her own resilience, and she's been able to, it was really cool because when she graduated high school, she was like, and her mom's a great mom. She wanted to go to college and do all this, and nothing wrong with college. I'm not saying that, I'm college educated, but she went to her mom and she said, I want to do what my dad does. She's like, I'm not going to waste your money on college. She's like, I want to travel around the world. I want to invest all of my high school graduation money. And she did. She put it in the capital market. She got her insurance policy set up. She does have a job. She trades time for money, but she takes that money and she invests it so that she can free up time in the future. And then my son, he doesn't know anything else, but he understands assets, liabilities. He's 8 years old. So I'm teaching him. He won't know anything else but wealth. Like, he won't have any other grooves in his mind other than prosperity.
That is such an awesome. I was going to ask you, what legacy do you want to leave? But I think you just told us. So I think that's amazing. Gosh, I could talk to you all day. You know that. I think we went over on our initial conversation when we were doing the pre-interview, because it's just, there's so many questions I have for you. But unfortunately, we're almost out of time. So I do want to ask you one of our VIP questions. I love, I've done this for so long, and I love getting all the different answers from people, even though it's the same question. So my VIP question that I want to ask you today is, if your life's work was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
He never stopped. That's it. Man who never stopped.
That's a good one.
Simple. The
That's
man
a
who
good
never
one.
stopped.
All right, how do people find you? Because I know they're going to want to, but just not while
thank
you're in
you.
Peru.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't find me whenever, or when I'm with my kids. But thank you so much. So if you go to Google, we've hashtagged it for the last 7 years. If you just type in 3T Warrior Academy, 3T as in Tom Warrior Academy, it'll pop up, or Coach JB, like junior varsity, in Google, and all of our content will pop up. So
I love that. Thank you so much for being here today. This has been another great conversation, and I just have one last thing to say to you. You are a VIP.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.